Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Congresswoman Laurel Lee. Congresswoman, thank you so much for joining me.
It's a pleasure to be with you again. Thanks for having me.
Of course, you just came back from a visit to the border, and this comes at a really historic time. The trip came as the number of migrant encounters at the border reached a historic high in December at over 300,000. So before we dive in, can you tell us about the trip and tell us what you saw?
So we had the opportunity to see firsthand the crisis that's facing the southern border. We talked to local law enforcement, we talked to sheriffs, ranchers, people who live in those communities, and they told us the stories about how this crisis has been affecting them in very real terms. And for some of them, their property, their businesses have been destroyed. And when it comes to law enforcement and first responders, they simply don't have the resources to respond to the surge in calls, the surge in community needs. It has really been catastrophic at border towns. And then, of course, as we know, one thing that we've seen over time is that this flow of migrants across our southern border has made really every city in America a border city. We're all being affected now by things like fentanyl trafficking and human trafficking and some of the other, really terrible things that are a consequence of what amounts to, at this point, lawlessness at our southern border.
I want to talk about a phrase that you used, that every city in this country is now a border city, and we've been hearing that a lot. Every state is a border state. A lot of my viewers don't live in a border state. I don't right now. I live in New York. So can you tell us what is missing from the conversation in these states that might not be seeing this, might not be living this every single day?
Well, one of the most important things is for Americans to understand the magnitude of this problem, that this isn't just a few people, this isn't just a short-term thing, this is millions of people coming across our border illegally, and it has really been happening throughout the Biden administration. They made decisions early on to reverse some of the policies that we knew were working, and what it has led to is just unchecked crossings at our southern border. And as we were hearing down on this recent trip, there are impacts across any sort of social service, schools, hospitals, law enforcement. The increase in the demand, the number of calls, and the strain on resources is incredibly significant. And the other thing that's important to remember is that the people who are coming across the border, in many cases, are coming across owing huge sums of money to people who trafficked them to the United States, and then, of course, unable to obtain lawful employment. So this is a dangerous situation, not just for the United States. We don't know who these people are. We don't know where they're going. We don't know what their intentions are. But it's also a dangerous situation for many of these migrants who have chosen to come across illegally instead of following the lawful pathway to coming to the United States. So it's a very serious situation now for all of our states in the country, and something that we are really committed to trying to address here in Congress.
I want to know about your conversations that you had with Border Patrol agents. I believe I saw on your social media you kind of compared them to travel agents, the way they're acting right now. So what do they have to say about the current situation?
Well, this situation has been incredibly difficult for men and women of law enforcement who work down on the border. So, of course, they are here, and their purpose and what they want to do is enforce our laws, make sure our country is safe, make sure their communities are safe. And because of these policies that are really just bringing in unchecked numbers of migrants to our country and placing them in other communities across America, what they are being forced to do day to day is bring these migrants in, process them essentially, make sure that they have clothing, give them food, and then move them to other parts of our country. And so they're not down at the border getting to enforce our laws, tell people to stay in their country of origin, none of the things that they typically would be doing. So I think it's been a very, very difficult situation for them. Many of them have, they're not able to take time off. Many of them weren't able to take time in the holidays that they wanted to take, because it is such a strain on resources as well. So, it is definitely not the way our immigration system is intended to work. This is not lawful. It's not the process that we're supposed to follow. The one thing that I will say, it's really time for this to be a bipartisan issue. This should not be a political issue. This is very significant for our national security to stop this flow, to ensure that we are tracking who's coming into this country. And as you know, we've found people from the terrorist watch list coming into our country illegally. So, I do think that we're starting to hear from some of our colleagues here in Congress that a recognition and local leaders in areas around America that recognize this is something that we have to address, that we must secure that border.
You bring up a really interesting point. This is obviously a political issue. You're saying this surpasses that. It's obviously been a hot button issue for a while now. So how do you work with Democrats? How do you bring them to the table and have these good faith discussions? Because I've had the opportunity to talk to many Democrats in Congress, and they've all said when the border has come up, this is a humanitarian crisis. So everyone can agree on that component. But now what's the next step here? Because from what you're saying, from what the stats are, this sounds certainly unsustainable.
Well, unsustainable is the right word. It absolutely is. This is not a small number of people. It is millions. So, a couple of things are important to remember. And one is on the subject of there being potential bipartisan interest, it's really reached a point now that America sees this as a crisis. So, it really is something that is an American issue and shouldn't be one party or the other fighting for it. It's a matter of national security. It's affecting our economy. We're enriching the drug cartels who are very much involved in the trafficking of fentanyl and the trafficking of people. So, these are issues that are very serious for our national security. And second, on the point about it having humanitarian impact, it is so important to remember that it is not a safe or sustainable situation for these migrants either, who are coming in beholden to traffickers. Border Patrol agents told us that many times they will have 7 to 9 years of time that it will take to work off these incredible debts that they owe to bad people, drug cartels that are facilitating their unlawful entry into this country. So it is not a humanitarian thing to encourage or incentivize people from around the world to come to this country illegally. What we should instead do is focus on our securing our border first, and then focus on legal immigration, the way that our system of laws and immigration laws are supposed to work, so that we know when someone comes to this country, they've done it in a way that is safe for them, it is safe for the United States of America, it is done in an orderly and lawful way. So we really need, Republicans in Congress have been committed to this since long before I was elected, but we've been working very hard on it for the past year. And I am very hopeful that we are about to see some of our Democrat colleagues acknowledge and recognize that this is something they need to be joining with us to do together.
When you say secure the border, what does that tangibly mean? Does it mean building a wall in some areas? Does it mean more law enforcement? What does that look like?
Well, there are a few things that we can do. First, we should return to the policies that we knew were working. One is having a physical barrier, a wall. Border Patrol agents that we have talked to, absolutely, it's common sense. If there's a physical barrier to someone walking across the border, that's going to make a difference. That's going to help. That's one of the things that helps make sure that our border is secure. While we were down there, members of Congress standing on the southern border, we actually watched people walk into our country, walk right across, right up a hill and into America, nothing stopping them from doing so. So a physical barrier, a wall, is absolutely important. The second thing we need to do is enforce our laws. We have laws right now that tell us how immigration can happen lawfully and what is unlawful. And we need to enforce those and get back to some of the policies that we know work, like remain in Mexico, stop the circumventing of the asylum process. These migrants who come here unlawfully that are put out with these court dates, sometimes it's 5, 6, 7 years down the future, and we don't even know where they're going. So the idea that we're somehow tracking them or giving them a court date is wholly inadequate to ensure that we know who they are, where they are, and we're making them comply with our laws. So we just need to get back to having a system in place, a system of laws that we enforce, that are meaningful. And by the way, that's what makes it meaningful for the people who did come here legally, that did do it the right way and are living the American dream. What are we saying to them? When they do it the right way, that's what we need to be recognizing, rewarding, and encouraging for people around the world who want to come to America.
I do now want to get your take on DHS Secretary Mayorkas. He was on Fox News just a few days ago, and he did admit that the numbers that we're seeing of migrants coming across the border are historic. Some Republicans have called for his impeachment. Do you echo those calls?
Well, Secretary Mayorkas has absolutely ignored the lawful process of immigration that currently exists in our United States Code. So we have at the Homeland Security Committee been keeping a very close eye on Secretary Mayorkas and the Department of Homeland Security as it relates to immigration, and have had a number of hearings already where we heard from local law enforcement. We heard from people who are involved in the human trafficking awareness, combating human trafficking. We've heard from people who lost family members to fentanyl poisoning. I have very grave concerns about Secretary Mayorkas and his performance in this role. And of course, I also represent Florida. And in Florida, we have grand juries and a federal judge who've specifically reviewed what's been going on under the policies of the Biden administration and Secretary Mayorkas' decision, and have concluded that those policies violate our laws. And yet he continues. So, I absolutely believe that Secretary Mayorkas has acted in a way that is intentional, that he understands that what he's doing is not appropriate, and that he continues to do so in defiance of court orders. And for me, as a former prosecutor and a former judge, that is simply unacceptable for anybody who raises their right hand and takes an oath of office here in the United States.
So do those concerns amount to you supporting that his impeachment, supporting Mayorkas' impeachment?
So what we'll be doing in the Homeland Security Committee over the next few weeks is concluding our hearings, having additional hearings where we hear from witnesses and we take a look at the things that he's been doing and really finalize our process of careful consideration of whether the behavior of Secretary Mayorkas rises to the level of impeachable. And what's important to remember there is that impeachment is not about political differences. It's not about disagreeing about, how something should look or having a policy disagreement about something. It's really about, is somebody who has taken an oath of office, somebody who's taken on a position of such incredible responsibility in our country, are they discharging those duties in a way that is consistent with that oath? Are they following the laws of this country? Are they really, doing things that are hurting America? And in the case of Secretary Mayorkas, the greatest concern is not only what has been occurring, but that it was done for 3.5 years, that it was done intentionally, that even after courts, grand juries, Congress have reviewed, raised concerns, pointed out the failures and the things that are inappropriate about these policies, that they've carried on, that they've continued with these policies. That really, every single day that Secretary Mayorkas is in office, America is less safe, and we know that. We've seen that now time and again. So it's a great concern to me that he continues to serve in that capacity.
Before I let you go, a word that I just wrote down that caught my attention that you've used a few times is intentional or intentionally when it comes to Mayorkas. Are you saying he's intentionally letting migrants through the border?
I believe he very intentionally is implementing policies that result in these millions of people coming across our border unlawfully. So Secretary Mayorkas is well aware that the asylum process isn't working, that this return for a parole hearing, alternatives to detention, that the policies that they are implementing aren't working. They are very well aware that people are coming into this country, that they can't be located. We don't know where they are. These court dates are years out in advance. So very much, this is very much a knowing and intentional process. And I'll tell you one more thing that's very concerning is the unaccompanied minors who are coming across our border. They have lost track of over 80,000 unaccompanied minors, children who've come into this country, and now we're unable to confirm their location. So there is so much that is wrong about allowing this magnitude of unchecked, unlawful migration into the United States. And so absolutely, it's impossible to be working, whether as a Border Patrol agent or all the way up to Secretary Mayorkas, and not see and not realize the scope and scale and seriousness of this failure. And that is, I'll tell you one more thing, is I really would love to see my Democrat colleagues in Congress go down, spend time on the border, and see what we saw. It is impossible to witness the things that we saw and hear from the witnesses that we saw and continue to deny that there's a crisis. And so, I would really just encourage anyone who has questions or isn't sure about just how serious this is to go down and see for yourself. That's one of the reasons that Republicans have continued to go down, because we believe it is vital to see it firsthand and to share with the American people firsthand exactly what's going on down there, how it's affecting our country, and what needs to be done to stop it.
Congresswoman, we do have to leave it there, but you are welcome back anytime to talk about this pressing issue. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. Great to see you.